Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Viddhishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us. May that one nourish us. May our study be vigorous and exact. May we have strength and vigor in our lives. May this illuminate us. May we not unnecessarily cavil or disagree with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om. I salute Lord Krishna, world teacher, son of Vasudeva, destroyer of Kamsa, Chanora, supreme bliss of Devaki. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanara Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. So we are continuing our study, and we're almost drawing to the end of our discourse on the Srimad Bhagwad Gita. It is a journey, we can consider it, a journey, a systematic journey to freedom. So we left off last week with some key concepts, and just to remind you what they were or what they are. Each person, in addition to offering their daily work to the Lord, must also practice some systematic things. This is designed to withdraw our attention from the world outside, the world of the senses, and to make our attention dwell lovingly upon the Lord. Everybody knows that, at least for a moment, our attention can be diverted. We know this when a child feels hurt or miserable or pained. We can simply pick the child up and divert the attention. Look at the moon here, look at the tree there, look at the flower. And in this way, child's attention gets easily distracted. Our attention too becomes easily distracted. One great difficulty in the modern world of technology is entertainment that is available easily distracts the mind. So we can, at least for a moment, have our attention diverted. This much we know. Something more attractive can be seen, caught by the eyes or heard by the ears. Now, if we can do it for a moment, can we cultivate that habit to do it for more than a moment? We can do it for 2 seconds. We can do it for 2 minutes. We can also do it for 2 hours, maybe 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 20 years. It's about cultivating systematically a different habit, making sure that the attention is lovingly engaged. And so we discussed last week some aspects of this: staying alone, we control food, avoiding opposites in life that we find: attraction, repulsion, hatred, love. And with a peaceful mind, we can contemplate the glory of the Lord. So we've had a brief sketch of this and the requirements that are there. So we brought up the question of detached activity. Is it easy? And then we found how easy it was when we add this extra dimension, love of God, doing everything as an offering, a kind of flower offering, taking your activities, even at the end of a day, assessing all your activities and offering them back to the author of your life, the chief executive officer of You Incorporated. And in this way, we can not only express a feeling of love, but we can also make an assessment of what needs improvement for the next day's offering. Lord, I did not do everything perfectly, but tomorrow I'll make a more perfect offering to you. And then we saw that one of the greatest obstacles, that's repeated over and over again, is egoism. What is egoism? The ego is a useful thing. The ego gives us an element of self-confidence. It's part of what we call our psychosocial evolution, enabling us to be commander-in-chief of all we survey, to exert our authority over every aspect of nature. But having that capacity, we have also the capacity to abuse it. You can look at the world, state of the world. On the Canary Islands, for example, thousands and thousands of refugees arrive from West Africa and running away. There are refugees from Syria, refugees all over the world, running away from terrible effects of warfare against civilians. It can break one's heart if one thinks of the tragedies brought on by mankind themselves, all because of this question of ego, a self-assertion that extends to an identity with national life or ethnic origins or religious differences even. And so the one thing standing in our way is this identification with the body. Don't forget, in chapter 15 we were told that a portion of myself has become this individual, seeming individual. Forgetfulness of this is called ignorance. So if we pick up this then, 59th verse, where we left off. Move that comes a bit later, but coming back. We left off, I think, abandon egoism, we covered, that's stanza 53. And then we pick it up at stanza 54. Going back to 53, just briefly, to understand the impact of this egoism, we have a whole string of things that upset ourselves and upset the world at large. Having abandoned egoism, says the stanza, hamkara balam darpam kamam krodam parigraham. Power comes from it. Arrogance comes from it. Desire comes from it. Enmity comes from it. And superfluous possessions, they also come from it. If you free yourself from this notion of mine, you immediately become peaceful. We complain we don't have peace, only because this egoism is there in the way. So this is not a standard ego. The ego has developed from our individual karma. We are bound toward survival, physical survival. And we then make a defense strategy. Those people who've been on the Enneagram will know how we make this defense strategy a cornerstone of our personality. And it becomes a great obstacle, but it is the one that creates the most arrogance in us. We are extremely proud of it and proud of the way we behave. Don't forget, as I mentioned before, there are no bad people, only bad behaviors. We have to learn to change the habit level. And so we pick it up with the 54th stanza, because what makes us fit for the supreme realization of our own nature, universally understood as Brahman? 54th stanza goes like this. Brahma bhutaha prasannatma na shochati na kanchati. What prevents our happiness? What gives us sorrow? This is the theme of all the Upanishads. And this summary of the Upanishads is known as Bhagwad Gita. Brahma bhutaha, becoming Brahman, serene-minded. He neither grieves nor desires. Why do we grieve? Because we have desires. We feel that there's a gap in us that needs to be filled from outside. We become very unhappy. And when we find an absence of somebody, a person, a place, even a possession that we miss, that is gone, we feel very unhappy. We feel sorrowful, bereavement. Even your pet dog can pass away, having lived its life, gone into old age in dog years, and we feel somehow completely alone. There is somebody in our locality who systematically used to walk a small dog. One day I never saw him walking, and I met him at some point in time. I haven't seen you for a long time, he said. What happened? Oh, my dog died. For that reason, I no longer walk. Will you replace it? Oh, nothing can replace my dog. So, but then you see, adding to the story, his daughter got a small dog and she can't afford the time to walk the dog. So he says, don't worry, in a self-sacrificial tone, I'll walk it. He's very happy inside, even though he doesn't want a substitute. Even so, the whole feeling of having a companion is there. And so we become serene-minded. But how can we become Brahman? Is Brahman also some object? You know, it's simply phrased that like that. Don't forget when we say becoming Brahman, we mean knowing Brahman. To become, to be one, is also to know. When you know this Brahman, then you have become this Brahman. You have felt the reality of this connection. Even the language is inadequate. You can't connect to something that you already are. Never mind, using the language of convenience, we say, becoming Brahman. What will happen? Serene-minded will be the effect of it. And you will never grieve. You will never be unhappy because you have no desires, no desires. The same to all beings. When you see somebody who is the same to all beings, you see, we talk about human equality, gender equality, social equality. But the reality is, on the physical level, there is no equality. There are some people who are poor. There are some people who are born with certain diseases. There are certain people who don't live this life very long. There are certain people who live a long and fruitful life. There are some people born into disease and poverty. How can we justify this position? Surely a created God will not give us the answer to this. We have to find a much more advanced understanding. And this is in the causal law that we call karma. The law of cause and effect, sowing and reaping. Whatever we sow, we will reap. And so, the equalness is not there, and yet it's below the surface. Just as there is no equality in erratic waves in an ocean, but at the great depth there's only one ocean. Supposing we are something like a big giant, so that if you step into the ocean's water, the water only comes up to your ankle. Prior to that, you ask somebody, how many continents are there? 7 continents. Get this huge giant of a man, you let him stand in water so the water only comes up to his ankle, and then ask him again, how many continents are there? Only one landmass he feels. What he sees above the surface of the ocean is only that same landmass raised here, raised there. In this same way, when you understand the reality, the unity of this oneness of existence, spontaneously you know, you understand this equality everywhere. And so you have the attitude of the same to all beings. The Bhagavatam is very expressive. It tells us, in order to experience and express this unity of existence, bow before the lowest in society, taking them as one. Bow equally before a cow and a dog. And lest people think you are mad, of course, in that state of a Paramahansa, you don't worry what people think of you. The characteristic of a Paramahansa is people will judge. This man is eccentric, is mad. So if you don't feel like going to that extent, at least mentally do it. So, serene-minded, he neither grieves nor desires, same to all beings. He obtains supreme devotion to me, and we may add, regardless of the path or approach you take. Supposing you take a path of jnana as a starting point. See, all these yogas are merely starting points. Equivalent to, supposing we want to clean a floor area, and one day you start from one corner. Next day I start from another corner. Next day you start from your corner, I start from mine. We will have covered the same ground. This whole totality of existence will be covered, regardless of what approach you take. So this Bhagwad Gita doesn't really make any fundamental distinctions between the paths you take. And this is revived by Swami Vivekananda, revived by his teacher in practice, the Master Ramakrishna, and again systematically revised and revived by Swami Vivekananda laying out 4 yogas and inferring very adamantly that these should all be practiced together, since we are not exclusively thinking people, exclusively feeling people, exclusively doing people, exclusively meditating people. We can integrate all these aspects of the mind in their expressiveness called yoga. So he's pointing out that if you become one with Brahman, becoming one, having simply abandoned egoism mainly, and through egoism abandoning all the ignorance that causes it, then equivalent to knowing Brahman, that is equivalent to becoming Brahman, then you'll obtain the supreme devotion to me. The jnani gets the love of God. And the one that follows bhakti yoga, will get this transcendent wisdom of the totality. And then he goes on to say, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yat chasmi tattataha tato mam tattato nyatma vishyate tad anantaram. By devotion, by this path of bhakti yoga, he knows me in truth. He gets that knowledge. The knowledge of the truth is both an immanent and transcendent knowledge. Seeing the world in, through, and as that one being. And then being in tune with the infinite absolute. What and who I am in by my own nature. You see me as a mere friend. You know remember how in the 11th chapter, Arjun feels apologetic. I didn't know you were this whole cosmos. I didn't know your glory. I didn't know that you were a creator and destroyer. I didn't know that you were pure energy. I knew none of this. And all the great deities, they knew none of this. And yet I've spoken to you so casually, like a friend, joking with you. I never knew this innermost cosmic glory of yours. So you'll know me in truth. As the jnani knows me, and he forthwith enters into me. Instead of becoming distinct, we start off in bhakti yoga wanting the Lord to be separate from us. We don't want to be sugar, in Ramakrishna's language. We want to taste the sugar, taste the sweetness. And yet, when you taste the sweetness to its fullness, what will you find? Oneness. The nearness becomes oneness. This great beatic vision takes place. This mystic union is inevitable. Sarva karmani api sadha kurvano madva pasrashaha mat prasadat avapnoti shashvatam badam avyayam. Even though engaged in all kinds of action, a person who has taken refuge in me reaches, by my grace, the eternal and imperishable abode. He's going to mention this twice. This grace, it is grace that we require. Let us try to explain or find out what is grace. Grace is something like a radio broadcast. through the electromagnetic field. We can catch it anywhere, given that we have a suitable transistor to tune into it. Tune into it. We don't have to go to the radio broadcasting station to get it. We have the equipment being there, the wave system being there, the capacity to broadcast the waves, and for this electromagnetic wave system, there's Akasha to catch it and have an all penetration anywhere in its field. With the will to tune in, the resolve to tune in, the sankalpa to tune in, and the mechanism to tune in, we can catch the broadcast anywhere. We can use this example even more because we use the radio broadcast almost in every aspect of our communicative life. We use this system when we tune in, as we are now, to the internet. We use this system when we have a radio use a mobile phone, cell phone. It is actually just catching radio waves at certain frequencies and tuning in. And when we call it cell phone, it means that different cells are there so that it bounces. We go into the field of one, and then there's another one that can supplement that, supplement that, supplement that. So grace is something like that. See, Ramakrishna's words, the wind of God's grace is continuously blowing. We but have to set our sail. But as we mentioned before, setting the sail is no mean thing. It requires, first of all, the will to do it. It requires the hard setting up of a post where the sail sits, a mast, and then all the complications of ropes and tied up, not getting entangled and all the rest of it. You can see clearly the analogy. What are these ropes? These are gunas, things that bind. When we untie them and make them useful to us, then the mast is set. The openness, the willingness to accept God's grace being there, then we leave it alone and God carries us by itself. So even though engaged in all kinds of action, doesn't matter what kind of action, but that action that Krishna mentions is the action suited to you, to your skills, to your abilities. Swadharma, there's something you alone can do, nobody else can do, catch it and use it. And later we'll find how Sri Krishna says, even if you refuse and don't listen to me, his exhortation, don't forget, is engage. You're a military person. That is your spiritual path. That is your swadharma. That is the righteous duty. That is your role in life that makes everything else fit together. Supposing we are a piece in a jigsaw and we decide independently to move away and join another jigsaw puzzle or change our shape, it won't fit in. It affects the entire picture when that happens. So even though engaged in all kinds of actions, it doesn't matter. We can still be free from actions and activity. A person who has taken refuge in me. But where do we take refuge? You see, the result of all our activities, the effects of all our activities, comes out as psychological conditions of disturbance of mind, a complaint, a worry, a difficulty. And then we try to correct it. Living in a world as a professional corrector will have no peace of mind. Letting go is the answer. Not being inactive, but letting go mentally. Letting go mentally, attending to this present moment, is what is called karma yoga. And where will we take refuge? Normally, we can make a whole list of where people take refuge. And you can make your own personal list of where you take refuge. This is devotional language. All throughout the prayers we find, let me take refuge in thee, let me take refuge at thy feet. Because where do we normally take refuge? Are we not all refugees away from our foreign land? Mentioning refugees going to the Canary Islands. Are we all not strangers? You see that Mano Chalu, that beautiful hymn that Naran, Swami Vivekananda later became, originally Naran, and he sits there and he sings this beautiful song. Mano Chalo, comparing our journey, something maybe like a mountain climb where there are rubbers and difficulties on the way, but good rest houses are also there. And why do you roam in a foreign land is the key question. Why don't you go home, oh mind? So it's a question for all of us. Why don't we go home? Why are we content to linger here in a world that we continuously complain about? We continuously find this is not a very pleasant or satisfactory world. We would wish to be free of it. But why don't you go home? Doing away with it won't go home. Setting ideal conditions like a paradise won't solve the problem. Even in paradise, there are mosquitoes. So, a man who has taken refuge where? In me, in the highest, in something that is constant, in some entity that is overflowing love and has the capacity to protect you. It's much better to take refuge in that. He reaches by my grace. By my grace means something like this. Imagine the soul, the jiva, is something like a mechanism or a probe that taps into a honeybee nest so that the honey flows. The honey flowing is this divine grace flowing toward us. Our spiritual effort, our desire, our love makes the honey flow. And we can take it in one of three ways. Either as an individual lover, a servant, a child, appealing for the grace out of love, allowing the love to tap into the corresponding nectar, the love and grace that flows toward us. Or we can feel an intimate connectedness, or we can feel oneness. Any one of these will make the grace flow. So the eternal and imperishable abode. How cleverly this is worded. We are all refugees away from our home, but where will we find ourselves at home? What will be my imperishable abode? That is the eternal. Eternal means beyond time. Imperishable means beyond parts. All parts perish. Anything assembled from parts will disintegrate and perish. Beyond time and space, beyond perishability, beyond the tyranny of time. Chetasha sarva karmani mayi samnyasya matparaha buddhi yogam upasritya vachitaha satatam bhava. Surrendering mentally, not actually physically, not saying, I will sit here, I won't do anything. Particularly addressed to Arjuna, who in the beginning wanted to do this. He wanted to surrender. He wanted to withdraw. He wanted to sit and leave a so-called spiritual life, not understanding his very activity is his primary spiritual activity. It is his spiritual field of endeavor. But surrendering mentally all actions to me, this is covered so many times in the Bhagwad Gita. Unknowingly, I think that I'm acting, I'm doing, I deserve rewards. But nothing belongs to me. It is the sun's energy, that's all. I recently put a thought out, something like that. It is not my energy. The solar energy beams away, and the plants hold out their leaves, catch that sunlight, and through the process of photosynthesis, they get their energy through the leaves from the sun. Don't ask the plant, where's your energy? Don't ask me, who munches and crunches on the potatoes that they produce from the carbohydrate. I have no claim on energy of my own. It is all this sun's energy. And he who lights the sun is what is generating the energy. Don't put it down to the hydrogen-helium fission. No. That entity stands there, energy, and the sun's borrowed energy, I borrow that, and walk around and run around on the bottled sunshine. So why don't I give this back? Why don't I acknowledge the true owner of this energy? I can surrender mentally all these actions. Lord, you are doing this. Problem arises. Oh Lord, telephone. This, by the way, is sign language for telephone. Lord, this is for you. Having me, that is the Lord, as the highest goal, resorting to the yoga of discrimination, that is buddhi yoga, always fix mind on me. This is now coming to Sri Krishna's supreme message. The message par excellence about fixing. And the title of this evening's talk was something like that, was fixing. How to fix the mind. Now, we can use the English word fix in a number of different ways. So, we fix a problem, or we fix something that is broken. The mind is not exactly broken, but is in need of repair. And how we repair it is not by taking it with spanners, opening up the head, and so on and so forth. Somebody once told me, I used to have an open mind, but then my brains fell out because I thought, you see, the mind is the brain. No, not by doing that, but by assessing the condition of the mind and making a correction on the conscious level sufficiently prolonged and sustained that the unconscious mind becomes naturally reformed and becomes in a condition for this revelation. There are conditions. We've already discussed what are the conditions, the preparation ground for becoming Brahman. What do we need to do? Later we'll see who is worthy of receiving the teaching. Means who is ready, who is willingly ready. So let us see what this stanza tells us. Combining now devotion in a beautiful blend, in a cooperative blend, with discernment of the jnani, the buddhi yoga, fixing the mind, fixing in the sense of when we fix the mind in a concentrated way, when we take all the available energy and steer it like a laser beam toward one object, it becomes a revealer. Fixing the mind on God. Imagine this devotional aspect. Where else is our attention? It means fixing our attention, of course. Taking all the avenues that our attention gets dispersed in and gathering it together and steering it and guiding it and beaming it in a chosen direction. Previously now, we had a guided meditation. If you fix your mind, then you won't fall asleep, because fixing is not the same as focusing. Focusing is like playing a musical instrument and playing one note interminably over and over again, being, as I describe, a public nuisance. Don't do that. Play a variety, but keep the mind engaged. Keep the constant mind in a state of love if you're a devotee, or a state of discernment if you're a jnani. And in all your actions, do it anyway. What use is it to sit down and do it? All your actions should be this concentrated effort, but surrendering mentally all the actions. And having, so karma yoga is mentioned, bhakti yoga is mentioned, jnana yoga is mentioned, and all of them require a fixation of the mind. So, Machitaha salva durgani mat prasadat tarisyasi atachet tam ahamkaram na sroyasi vinangyasi. Fixing your mind on me again. You will overcome what? What stops us from fixing the mind? Obstacles. What is the prime obstacle? Egoism. By my grace, again it's mentioned. But if from egoism is the primary obstacle. If from egoism you do not listen to me, you will perish. This is not a threat. It's a statement of fact. What degrades us, what drags us down, remember in the 6th chapter, the prerequisite for meditation. There it's told, see, that you alone will drag yourself down. You alone will raise yourself up. You alone are your worst enemy. You alone are your best friend. And then we see in the early part of this Bhagwad Gita a wonderful psychological profile. It begins a degradation, and naturally the opposite is bringing the mind up. A psychological degradation which begins with brooding on the objects of the senses, and ultimately loss of discrimination and loss of sanity, even dragging your mind down. You can even profile it on the standard the DSM arrangement for classifying mental degradation or difficulties or aberrations. Then we go on then, 59th stanza. Yad ahamkaram ashritya na yatsya iti manyase mitai sa vyavasayas te prakritis tam niyoksati. If filled with egoism, why wouldn't I listen to all these 17 chapters, 18 chapters, 17 in terms of teaching? Why would I not listen to all this advice laid out generally and then in great detail? There's only one thing, I think I know better. So Krishna warns, just as an add-on to the last stanza, if filled with egoism, ahamkaram, you think, with folded arms and gritted jaw, I will not fight. Don't forget, this is exactly what he had said. Before this great teaching, Arjuna declared, made up his own mind, I will not fight. And Krishna says, you have to fight. And it's the same with us. Fight in what sense? A military campaign? You see, in Islam, they have the concept of jihad. And the mystic elements of Islam would declare, this is not a holy war that is there to defend theology. Jihad is the struggle in you. Jihad is the fight, the warfare in your own mind. But do we have to struggle? No. We can fix our minds on the Lord. No struggle is necessary with that particular path. We don't have to endlessly struggle with guilt and endlessly struggle with the past and ask why, or make excuses, or go into a victimization mode, poor me. None of this is necessary. We don't have to labor on theological sin. We don't have to say, what a pity. We can instead say, what a glory. So if filled with egoism you think, I will not fight, then your resolve is in vain. You have the wrong sankalpa. You resolved incorrectly because it's not going to work. Why? Your very nature will compel you to do it. Can you change the nature of a crocodile? A crocodile is designed to bite your legs if given a chance. Can you change the nature of a snake? Can you change the nature of a scorpion? Are we not higher than this? You might say. Oh, yes. But our nature, don't forget, is causally combined. We ourselves have produced it. Starting off with a basis, accepting the surface report from the senses as the reality. We have been blinded, not realizing this is God's game of hide and seek on us, not on us, on Himself, He being the only existence. Imagine now, from here gets developed egoism. This is so beautifully laid out and precisely laid out in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, that there are kleshas, obstacles. What are these? It starts off from the obstacle of all obstacles from which everything else comes. Avidya, ignorance, lack of knowledge. What is the antidote for ignorance? Knowledge. And this knowledge, as we have found out, comes to us through devotion, love of God. And love of God comes from this path of knowledge. These are not two separate things. They culminate in the same thing. Once we've gotten the sum totality of everything, some totality of truth, we have everything. So, your very nature is that of Kshatriya. You're a skilled archer, you're born like that. Mozart was born as a genius. Beethoven was a genius. Einstein, some people may say, had a natural genius for ideas out of the box, inspirational ideas that came to him, unusual ideas, inventive ideas, ideas that seemed strange at the time, going against the grain and being bold enough to assert, I don't mind. And the expression, it came to me. Another way of saying God's grace filled a gap in me. Where a problem required a solution, it came to me. God standing by, ever willing. As soon as there's a gap in my inquiring mind, fills it. And wherever there is a gap in nature, God's grace moves it forward and fills it and completes it. We only do a small amount, a few steps, and God completes it. Makes the crooked path straight for us. The lion's share is God's. The small effort is ours. So your nature, whatever it is, your personality, your behavioral traits, your habit level, your unconscious mind will compel you. You are a born Kshatriya. It will compel you. We cannot change our nature. If it is our nature, we cannot change our nature. So, even if you go against it, or try and go against it, or don't listen to me, or go your own way, the cause of it is only because you think that you are this embodied entity with your own energy supply, a perpetual motion machine, independent of everything else, an island that has its own sense of individuality, but you are wrong. Swabhava jina kuntaya nibadaha svena karmana kartam ne kshatsi yan mohat kariyasya vyavaso pitat. Bound, we are bound by three gunas, by your own karma, your own action and reaction, your own cause and effect, born of your own nature, that which from delusion you wish not to do, even that you shall do helplessly against your will, O son of Kunti. Now there's an ongoing discussion always, and that discussion is centered around free will. Do we have free will? Do we really have free will? Is a common question. There are those who think that the causal law is in place to such an extent that any activity that is done can be traced back to another cause, another cause, another cause, and if the first cause falls, the rest falls like dominoes. A deterministic universe like that has no capacity for free will. In discussing this matter, Swami Vivekananda We say the idea of will and freedom, these ideas are mutually contradictory, because will requires a precondition. If I want to move a chair, pre-existing chair has to be there. So some cause or relationship will have to be there, and freedom has no causality in it. Freedom has no conditionality in it. Freedom is freedom. But we use the expression free will because there is a free choice available to all of us on the conscious level. But underneath that, a driving force is there, and we have no choice in the matter. We have no choice to be born. We have no choice to live in an ignorant condition. In a sense, we have no choice. We are part and parcel of this magnificent, inscrutable Maya, this Maya Leela, this play, this dance, this drama. So both free will is there, and also indeterminism is there, and determinism is there. Both are there. In this case, he says, you're helpless against your will because, on the other hand, because of your exertion of will, you developed a certain characteristic, a certain aspect of behavior. Ishwaram sarva bhutanam hrideshi arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rutahani mayaya. A Lord dwells where? Not in a heaven, not in a special place above the clouds, but in the hearts, the very core of all beings. Hrideshi, the heart of all beings, Sarva Bhutanam. This Ishvaraha, this great Lord, dwells in the hearts of all beings. This is echoed beautifully in many passages in the Upanishads. And we heard in the 15th chapter there mention of the nine-gated city that the body is. We revalue this not as my body, but as God's earth car. It would be much more appropriate. The dwelling house of the Lord, in which case we need to keep it clean. We need to polish the inside, polish the mind, polish God's sitting room through meditation and japa, repetition of His name, and cleaning the external of the body for cleanliness to keep away COVID disease and so on. And then the internal side of the body through proper selection of food, cleaning the body through exercise and systematic health practices, and keeping the mind stress-free. Primary cause for internal difficulties in the body is stress. Every thought you have has its immediate effect on the body. And then this beautiful, beautiful image comes out. This work of art called the Bhagwad Gita brings out this wonderful, wonderful phrase. Brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra ruthani mayaya. By his maya, by his magic, by his entertainment, by his capacity to measure through space and time, this causes all beings, this prakriti, this nature, this manifest Brahman, this conditioned Brahman as it were, causes all beings to revolve as if mounted on a machine. This is worthy of meditation. You can take any object you like or combination of objects and see how they are just like mechanical things mounted on a machine. The modern scientific materialist will be a reductionist, reducing everything to machines and component parts. A clockwork universe with no clockmaker or watchmaker. Something that is self-running is just a machine. The atheist Richard Dawkins mentions this in his book. We are but lumbering robots, he says. Imagine now that we are just chemistry, walking chemistry with component parts, just lumbering robots. What a description. The genes operating at the core of the genetic level, the genome, the DNA, is the master of our destiny. He writes this in his book, The Selfish Gene. Somehow, paradoxically, putting a personality on the gene, but claiming, well, this is just a story way of telling it. It's just an analogy. We can take any of these things and they are revolving on a machine, no doubt. In that sense, insentient. But what causes them to look sentient? This Maya operating, but there's no Maya without the operator. There's no machine without an operator. In devotional life, we can easily claim it as Sri Ramakrishna did. I am the machine, you are the operator, he says. Tameva sharanam kacha sarva bhavana bharata tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapyasi shashvatam. Again he repeats, seek refuge in him alone with all your heart. Every religion that espouses the love of God will have this wonderful sentiment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, your whole being, unconditionally. By his grace, third time mentioned, you will gain supreme peace and the eternal abode. What are we looking for if not peace? The whole world wants peace. The whole world wants unity. The whole world wants equilibrium. Even those who are causing lack of peace or disturbances make the excuse, we are doing it to get peace. Imagine now the United Nations peacekeeping force using military people gathered from members throughout the world, trying to operate in hotspots in Africa, for example, and armed to the teeth for the sake of peace. Peacekeeping force, they call it. Imagine the dissimilarity of words. Peace and force in the same sentence. And again, this word is used, the eternal abode. Things that are repeated are things that are important, things that we need to catch on to. It is told that if we want to catch properly a concept, we have to repeat it a minimum of 6 times. And Vyasa knows this. So all karma, all activity actually belongs to one entity, Ishvara. And these stanzas from 61 to 62 lay this out. So egoism is harmful was the message. We can fix our minds. And furthermore, all karma, all action does not belong to us. Now, we have gone through this many times in the Bhagwad Gita, but the 18th chapter is a summary, is a summum bonum of all the messages of the Bhagavad Gita. In true educational style, tells us in the 2nd chapter everything that we're about to learn and say. Everything you'll find in the 2nd chapter, everything you'll find in the 18th chapter, and then goes into great detail, and then this great, great summary in the 18th chapter. So we go on to a different subject now, freedom of inquiry into truth. Iti te jnanam adhyatam guhyad guhyataram maya vimrashai tat asheshena yate chasi tatakuru. Thus has wisdom more profound than all profundities been declared to you by me. Reflect upon it fully. Now he gives a freedom of choice. What a wonderful approach. Respecting our freedom of will, here is the teaching, here is the deepest wisdom that you can have. I have laid everything before you. I have solved all your problems for you. I've given you a practical teaching. I've given you the principles and the practical implementation. I've told you the intellectual side, and I've told you the emotional feeling side that can catch up to it and make it practical. Having done all of this, I now give you the option. Reflect upon it fully. You see, very often I ask people, have you studied the Bhagwad Gita? Oh, yes, I read the Bhagwad Gita. You see, I say study, they say read. No, all of these comes out of the threefold process of Shravana, Manana, Nitityasana, hearing it, reflecting on it, and meditating on it. Because this is how this came about. It came about through meditation, and then reasoning it out, and then presenting it. So we find we don't really reflect on these things fully. This Bhagavad Gita and all the stanzas contained within it are worthy of meditation. You'll never run out of subject material. So reflect upon it. You've heard it, Shravana. Now Manana, reflect on it fully, in every detail. And having reflected on it, decide whether it's rational or not. Decide whether you want to adopt it. And so you can choose as you like. Act as you choose. And who is ready for this? And what is this highest teaching? The highest teaching is about to come out. I'm just checking the time. It is nearing 9 o'clock. So we'll finish off with these few stanzas and review it. And next week, we will end the whole of the Bhagavad Gita series. Sarva guhya yatamam bhuya shunu me paramam vachaha ishtosi me tritam ititato vakshami te hitam. Listen to my supreme word, the profoundest of all. Profoundest of all means of all scriptures, of all things told in all eras and in all future times. The profoundest of all. Why profoundest of all? The highest teaching, because this is a summary of the Upanishad. And after every chapter, don't forget, is told, this is an Upanishad. This is Yoga Shastra. So, the profoundest of all, you are beloved of me. That's why I'm telling you this. And that's why we have inspiration in our life. And that's why we have a guiding helmsman, divine helmsman, guiding us through life, regardless of the mess we make it. Therefore, I shall tell you what is for your good. You can decide what you like, but I'm telling you this is for your good. And then he goes on, the most important, supreme teaching, the highest possible that is laid out. And there we leave it. Manmana bhava mad bhaktu madhyaji mam namaskaru. Mam eva yassi satyam te pratijani priyosime. Fix your mind on me. How many times will you tell it? Because it's the supreme teaching. Be devoted to me. Put your heart and soul into it. Worship me. Prostrate before me is much more specific. That is surrender to me, not just a ritualistic action of prostration. Not just genuflecting and kneeling, but the Eastern prostration that Sister Nivedita took and accepted, for example, was bowing low, the lowest possible, full prostration on the floor. So shall you come to me, and this is my promise, my pledge to you, for you are dear to me. God is love. And then having abandoned all duties, that is, all attachment, or personal responsibility for your actions, doing your actions anyway, but having abandoned attachment to all these, taking refuge in me alone, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, I shall liberate you, jnana yoga. I shall free you from all your discrepancies, your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, your sins, and the most important thing, grieve not. Our biggest difficulty is bereavement. It's our deepest, most profound unhappiness. So we will continue this. We will explore these two stanzas in greater depth next week. And we will continue next week by laying out who is competent to follow this teaching. Not everybody is competent. There are people who say you must follow the Bible or follow this scripture or that scripture. But here is saying, if you're not competent, leave it. And then going on to what is a description of this dawn of knowledge. And don't forget, this whole thing is being described by Sanja. And so he finishes this off, and that closes really the whole of the Bhagavad Gita after that. We conclude this finally then next week. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.